I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, January 22nd, 2024, and the time is 6 p.m. A reminder that Board Member Ben Miller is joining us remotely, so all votes will be by roll call facilitated by Anita Ozzie. Thank you, Anita. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of the community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Dr. Hellman, we have some items in the table file. Will you update us?
We do. We have several items under the consent agenda. We have some increase, decrease, change in assignment. We have a couple of leaves of absence, and we have a resignation for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Okay, moved by Jeff. Second. By Amy, thank you. Anita, will you facilitate the vote?
Gerwitz.
Aye.
Gonzalez George.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Cornell.
Aye.
Stratmon.
Thank you. Motion passes. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Okay, that was item 3, and so we'll move on to item 4, which is announcements and recognitions.
And we have no announcements nor recognitions this evening.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Item 5, items for discussion and reports. We have a financial forecast this evening. Dr. Hellman will present on that updated financial forecast.
Well, good evening, board members. And as you know on the agenda, it says that this would be presented by Val Murderstorff, and I am not Val Murderstorff. And as people here know, and Val has given me permission to share, she had some unplanned surgery on Saturday. And so she is home recovering and watching this and is going to grade me afterwards. So I feel very comfortable in providing the financial forecast. And some of you, if you have detailed questions, the ones that I cannot answer, we'll just have to wait till Val comes back, if that's okay for tonight. So we are going to this is the time of the year where we do our annual financial forecast and budget plan. This is the standard process that we have used for some time in this district. And we'll walk through the forecast and the plan here. So these are the things that we'll talk about. We'll remind board members and members of the community about our financial cycle. We'll talk about parameters, projections, and assumptions, all really key parts of the budgeting process. We'll talk about the summary of those parameters as we have them as of today. And then we will share with you what the timeline will be for the rest of the spring as we are in budget season. So the financial cycle is just that. It begins every year. At this time, this is really the first step in the financial cycle, the financial forecast. And so we're looking at the forecast. We're looking at what the revised budget information that we had from December was. We are looking at what the legislative outlook is. So we're looking ahead at the next legislative session. This legislative session is the second of the biennium, typically not a funding year, more known as a bonding year. That's really what we're hearing out of St. Paul right now, to more of a focus on the bonding year rather than any kind of supplemental budget, though we will, of course, be advocating for some supplemental funding. And then the assumptions, deciding the assumptions for the budget are really critical. The second part of that process is adopting the budget. So that's April through June. Those are the big kinds of things with staffing, making sure that we're implementing or planning for any legislative changes. And then, of course, enrollment is such a huge driving factor in our budgeting in that April through June timeline. One of the really benefits of this year's forecast is we are not planning budget reductions for next year as we have the last 2 years. So that's a different place to be. So that does adjust the budget cycle just a little bit. Then in September through November, we really start working on the audit reports. That is looking at the last fiscal year. And as you know, we've had several years in a row, we've had nothing but stellar audit reports, thanks to Val's leadership and the members of her finance team. And then we do the revised budget along with the truth and taxation presentation in December. We revise the budget because we know more in December than when we did setting the budget in June. So that's the financial cycle. So here are the known parameters that we have. These are the things that we know as of today. First and foremost, when we look at the budgeting process, we look at our strategic commitment of stewardship. And our statement is we responsibly manage our personnel, finances, property, time, and environmental impact. So the financial portion of that includes our staffing and all the kinds of things that go into the budget. So our strategic commitment to stewardship is critical. We know that we ended last fiscal year with a 12.9% unassigned fund balance. That's less than what we had anticipated. The reason, as you know, was some changes in how we had to book certain expenditures that were changed, or some general accounting principle changes that required us to book that earlier than I had anticipated. I know Val has shared that with you in the past. We do have a revised budget that plans for a surplus of just under $800,000, $786,000, 28 to be exact. So that is the revenue over expenditures, which is a good place to be in terms of continuing to replenish our fund balance. We are still projecting for a decline in enrollment in 2024-25. As you know, we have a declining enrollment projection. This is the 1 year that is stable, right? And actually a little bit ahead of where we thought we would be. But in the 10-year cycle, this was the year that we thought we would be flat. And it's showing we're actually a little bit ahead of the game on that. But our projections still show decline enrollment from 2024-25 and beyond. It's always important to remember we're a human-centered organization. So 80% of our expenditures will be salary and benefits because we hire people to do good things for kids. We all know the 8 pages of 7-point font that I've shown you with all the potential legislative changes are no longer potential. But those significant legislative changes are also parameters that we have. And we also know that enrollment drives around 70% of our total revenue. That's why declining enrollment is such a tricky place for districts to be. We also are leveraging the budget priorities that our teams did last year over the last couple of years. So even though we're using these budget priorities at those times for reducing the budget, they are also about how we manage the budget. So as we look at how we assign funding for this coming year, we'll continue to use these priorities. And from time to time, those priorities do come into conflict, right? 2 things can be true at the same time. And so as we look at these, we'll continue to use them as the lens in which we make decisions. So the enrollment history and projection, you can see exactly what we're talking about, that we had several years of declining enrollment. This is that 1 year in the projection where we are stable and actually just a little bit ahead of the ball game. And then you see that we project that we're going to continue to reduce. A lot of that does have to do with larger graduating classes, smaller incoming kindergarten classes. But in our district, it isn't always that simple. We do have students who enter our system at differing points in their pre-K-12 career. So we have some students who come to us after spending time at Prairie Creek, one of our 2 charter schools. They may enter in 6th grade. There are times where we'll have students who will enter the high school either through open enrollment, specifically for high school programming, or if they've completed through 8th grade at St. Dominic, our parochial school. So it isn't at many districts. It's a very simple. If you have less kindergartners than you have graduates, that is what drives your decline in enrollment. That is true for us as well, but there's some other complicating factors in that projection, but you can see those projections here as we move ahead. Our financial assumptions for the year. So at this point, we are continuing forward with the board approved strategic plan goal, the benchmark of a 14% unassigned fund balance. And just as a reminder, we calculate that as a percentage of general fund expenditures, excluding operating capital, long-term facility maintenance, student activities, and scholarships. And the reason that that is the case is that those are restricted sources. We can't use those funds for anything but what they are assigned for. Our revenue assumptions is that we are being conservative and saying that we will get the minimum increase of 2%. This is the first year where we have the inflationary factor built into the per pupil basic funding formula in our state. And remember, the floor is 2%, the ceiling is 3%. So right now we are being conservative and saying we believe we'll get the 2% minimum increase. Again, we've talked about declining enrollment. We will see some referendum inflationary increase. We are getting the benefit now of the capital projects levy increase. So you'll recall when we passed the capital projects levy in 2022, what we looked at was that was going to help us save around $600,000 from the general fund by assigning eligible technology services staff salaries to the capital projects levy as allowed under state law. So that we're going to start getting the benefit of that. We're seeing a 2% increase in special education funding this year. We're assuming that federal funding is held flat. I do want to just point out the declining enrollment factor can really affect our revenue assumption, because even though we may hear that we got a certain percentage, 4% increase on the basic formula for this year from the state, if you don't have all of your students returning, you don't get the full benefit of that 4%, right? So if you have in a system that is based on funding of the number of students that you have, when you continue to lose students, you don't get the maximum benefit of what you have from the state increases. So that's an important part, just to understand that that erodes the positive things that we have seen from the legislature. So I think that's an important piece to point out. Expenditure assumptions, the assumption across all employee groups, the average would be 3% increase in salary and benefits. That does not mean that a person's paycheck would be increased by 3%. Some people could be more, some people could. That's what the average is when we look at the entirety of salary and benefits across the entire system for 24-25. That is what we are projecting for the average increase for all employee groups. And then we are projecting between 3 and 5% for non-salary issues. Now, inflation is really still a concern in things like property and liability insurance. We're still seeing some of those kinds of increases that are being more affected by inflation than some others. So it isn't the same level of concern that it might have been a year or two ago, but we are still seeing some pressures in that area depending on the non-salary expenditure that we're looking at. So when finance department puts together this projection, what you're going to see is that you'll see that we are projecting to increase the fund balance this year. We are also projecting in for 2024-25 also to increase the fund balance. You'll see there. And then in 25-26, once you get beyond the biennium, we start to see a decline in that assumption. And so the further to the right on any of these charts that you get, the less we can say with certainty, the less assumptions that we have confidence about. So you'll always see this chart become worse the further to the right that you move. So while it is arriving a little bit before our original projections last summer when Val did the interim financial forecast for the next 2 years, this year and next year, we feel we're going to be able to meet our fund balance goals. And of course, there's a lot of decisions to happen between now and then. And this is why you do a financial projection, so we can take into account the decisions that we make for next year and how they might cascade forward into the following years. So again, you'll see those items there as well in the that particular format. So then the next step is the budget development. And so over the next several months, you will see components of the budget presented to you. We don't present the budget to the board in just one fell swoop because that's a lot of information. So we break it down over the course of several months. So at the next meeting, you will hear the operating capital and long-term facilities maintenance revenue budget. That's standard. It's one of the areas where we show that budget to you early, and we ask the board to approve that early as well, so that we can start signing contracts with vendors that we're working on for those capital projects that we want to have take place over the summer. I think sometimes people forget the summer is fairly short, actually, from the season where we do updates to facilities, et cetera. So trying to get those things done so that we are able to have all of that completed by the time students come back is important. On March 11th, you'll have the debt service and the internal service fund. Those things are the simplest pieces to explain because it's about voter approved debt and how we're paying that. And then the internal service fund is about our health and dental insurances. In April, you'll start to hear from child nutrition and community services. Those are budgets that are outside the general fund. On May 13th, you will hear the general fund, which of course the engine of the entire overall budget. And then we will ask you to approve the 2024-25 proposed budgets for all of the funds at the second meeting in May. We're required by law to adopt a budget by the end of June each year. So those are the processes that we'll use. Those are some of the assumptions that we are taking into account. And as I said, I am no stand-in for Val Murdersdorf on a variety of levels, but I would do the best that I can to answer your questions at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Hillman. Board members, do you have any questions or comments? And I'll call on you, Ben, in just a bit. Okay, Amy?
It's not really a question. I just want to thank you, Val, for, again, outlining everything so clearly and understandably. Thank you.
Ben, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I do. And yeah, we certainly all wish Val a speedy and quick recovery, full recovery. Dr. Hillman, just a quick question on the calculation or the kind of 2%, 3% that goes into the assumption for calculating the budget. I know that's new after this legislative session. Do you know what kind of variables factor into that when it actually kind of comes to pass, that 2 to 3%? Do they look at what's the metric the state's looking at?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ben. And what I do know is that the Commissioner of Education will be the one who says what that inflationary rate is for the year. In my glazing over of all of the different legislative pieces, I should have looked at that for tonight, but I didn't. I can certainly get the information when I get back to my computer and can share that later in the board meeting.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. There's a lot to know, but
My understanding is it is a state. I'm not going to speculate. I will wait and read it.
sure. Sounds good. Thank you.
I do know that the commissioner will set that. The commissioner has the authority to set what the inflationary factor is.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Right, you're off the hook. Thanks, Dr. Hillman. Okay, item B is the summary of the superintendent's mid-year evaluation, and I will be presenting that. The copy of my summary is in the board packet. We do an evaluation on the superintendent twice a school year, an academic year. And so this is the mid-year performance review. I did meet with Dr. Hillman on Wednesday last week and presented the comments and the ratings, and the comments were not attributed to anyone. At this mid-year evaluation, while goals are still in progress, Dr. Hillman received an excellent appraisal, achieving an overall rating of 4.87 out of 5. It's terrific. This board continues to hold high confidence for Dr. Hillman's leadership and direction for the Northfield Public Schools. Below, I will highlight one area of strength, the mission and vision. This important category evaluates the superintendent in detailed pieces of mission and vision, which succinctly stated include engaging all stakeholders in a shared vision of learning, implementation of strategies that result in measurable achievement gains, fosters a culturally competent environment where diversity is valued, and includes also establishing goals for staff learning. With a high rating in this individual category of 4.93, members rated Dr. Hillman highly in his execution of mission and vision. He works easily every day in an area of this large and important category. Whether he is meeting with stakeholders by starting every morning in a different district building so he can connect with parents, students, and staff, or he is participating in meetings with local organizations, Dr. Hillman is always sharing vision and mission with empathy and investment in the person in front of him. Lastly, the World's Best Workforce Benchmarks reports on achievement for all students. For the 22-23 year, Dr. Hillman, through his administrators, was able to see 68% of our third grade students meet grade level proficiency on the 2023 MCA reading test, which exceeded the goal for that year. This is just a small sample of Dr. Hillman's proficiency in this category. And as one board member stated, vision is Dr. Hillman's middle name. He's a strong leader with a clear vision for Northfield Public School District. And it's also his favorite topic of conversation. Well said. At this mid-year evaluation period, the entire board agrees that our district is being led well, and we place our full confidence in Dr. Hillman's leadership. We continue to be grateful for the relationships he has built over the years, evidenced by a community that supports our students, both financially and with investments of time. We also see very low teacher turnover and recently successfully negotiated a new contract with the teachers, again, thanks to Dr. Hillman and his administrators, cultivating good relationships with staff. Thank you for your service, Dr. Hillman. Thank you so much, board members, for helping complete that evaluation. I open the floor if you would like to be called on to give comments. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item. Okay, Ben, in case you want to make a comment, otherwise we'll move on.
I'm good, but just keep up the good work, Dr. Hillman. Appreciate it as always. Thanks.
It's my
Thank you.
privilege to get to do this work here with you. So thank you.
Great. We are on to item C, which is the potential 2024 Northfield High School bond referendum update. Dr. Hillman will present review of the January 16 work session and the initial cost estimates for several options to address the facility problems at Northfield High School.
Yes, and just before I get to that, I do have the answer for Ben's question on the inflation, if that's okay. What it says is in January of the calendar year in which the formula allowance begins, the Commissioner of Education must calculate the rate of inflation equal to the change in the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers as published in the Bureau of Labor Statistics of the Department of Labor. Now, here's the key. For the average of the fourth calendar quarter of the second prior fiscal year compared to the average fourth quarter of the immediately prior fiscal year. So they're doing that year over year comparison. And then it requires the commissioner to publish that by the end of February. So Ben, I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Dr. Hellman.
And so here we're going to talk about our bond referendum process so far. And just I think it's important every time, even though board members have heard this over and over again, people enter this conversation at different times. And when we have a public discussion, I just think it's important to re-ground ourselves and where we've been. So very briefly, I just really appreciate the methodical and deliberate approach that the board has taken. We have been very thoughtful about every step of this process. We have had a timeline that really started back in October. That timeline has included multiple work sessions where board members really got to hone in with our expert partners on the problems to solve and now moving toward what potential options are there to solve those problems. We've been talking about this, or an opportunity to talk about it, every one of the public board meetings. We bring forward the relevant documents from the work session to the board meeting. They're in the board packet in an effort of transparency with the community. We have completed so far 3 of the 4 planned high school tours. This past Saturday, we held our 3rd tour, and it was the most well-attended so far. We estimate around 40 people were there. Really great tour, lots of great questions, and we just really appreciate the community getting involved. You know, we are at the end of the time frame on our stratified randomized sample phone survey, and those results will be presented to the board later in February, the February 26th meeting. We know that we have a public meeting now coming up 1 week from tonight, and I'll review that at the end of the meeting, but we have a public meeting again, really to get the public's advice on what steps they think we should take with the high school facility. So again, we're getting feedback from people who have come on the tour. At the end of every tour, people can use a QR code. They're able to give us some feedback through a survey. We have the 400 phone call survey happening. We also have this public meeting. So we're trying to give people a variety of different ways in which feedback can be shared. I think it's important to note that the board did a lot of work coming to coalesce around what are the problems to solve at the high school facility. By my count, there were 23 different problems that we coalesced around, but really they were in 4 different areas. One was about infrastructure. So those critical systems of the building that are now at end of life. A lot of talk has been in that around the HVAC system specifically and the precarious condition of that HVAC system, as has been evidenced through some of the examples that we have provided. Antiquated R values of some of the oldest walls of the building. So those infrastructure, critical systems that are at the end of life. The classroom, laboratory, shop, and learning space updates, both to modernize instructional space for the, now we're staring into the second half of the 21st century, right? So we're looking beyond that. And so what we're looking at there specifically is around things like natural light. We've talked a lot about how natural light has been demonstrated to impact not only academic achievement, but also student mental health and well-being and staff mental health and well-being. We've talked about air exchange and the positive impact that quality air exchange systems have on student learning and of course, staff recruitment and retention. Accessibility to make sure that all parts of the building are accessible for all of our users, those with disabilities and those not with disabilities. The climate of the building, the temperate nature of some places being really cold and some places being really warm. And obviously that goes to some comfort. So that's another. So infrastructure, those classroom climate and comfort issues, safety and security, something that we wish we would not have to talk about, but we do have to talk about it. We do have to think about it. What is that balance of providing both a secure facility and one that is safe and one that also feels like a learning institution for students. I think we've done fairly well overall with what we have to this point, but that is always something that we need to take into consideration. We know the high school with 37, at least 37 exits. Also, that means there's 37 ways people potentially could access the facility. We also know that we have more requests for the community to access the space, either through activities, our own school activities, or activities that the community would like to use buildings that they are paying taxes for, to be able to access those. And so those are the larger problems that those clusters of problems that we've intended to determine to solve. So after really doing a lot of work around that, we have now got to the point where we do have some potential solutions. And the potential solutions were presented at the last work session. And there are really 6 pathways that have been identified. Now, all of these are draft, they are test fits. Want to be very clear, they are not final, right? But they are ways for us to talk about and think about how do we continue to refine what we want to do at that facility. So one of the pathways would be to do nothing. I don't think that that's responsible, but it is an option that we could pick. There are really 3 versions of a maintenance and renovate in place, if you will. So one piece that would really just address the maintenance and modest renovation issues, if you will, through that plus a potential turfed practice field to expand Phi-Ed teaching space and the ability to use an outdoor field, not for competition, but for practice, try to extend that into what have been some pretty wet springs. A third option will be those first 2 plus a 4-court field house to really try to relieve some of the pressure that we have on the district's gymnasiums. And again, for that physical and mental wellness of our students and community. So those are all different flavors of that first pathway. Another pathway would be reimagining the existing, let me go back. Those first 3 options from that just basically maintain or renovate in place through those couple of other additions, those range from, again, estimated 2027 costs of $59,522,967 to the top end of that would be around $87.2 million. So it ranges from that low end of just doing items, just maintaining and some renovation of that existing structure through some of these additions, turf and or a field house, ranging from $59.5 million to $87.2 million. The second pathway would be to reimagine the existing facility, and that would involve concepts of new additions, multi-story new additions that would be much more efficient from a utility perspective, while also removing or demolishing the parts of the building that are the least efficient. There'd be some other items that would be included in addition to the field house component, some other reimagining of some heavier renovation and the vocational and art spaces, lighter renovations in places like the media center and some of those in between. Now, that estimate is around $117.6 million. And again, there's a lot of different ways that you could look at that, but that is the estimate. It would include a field house. It would include the addition. It would include some demolition of some of the older parts of the older and less efficient parts of the facility. Now, again, that is estimated to be around $117.6 million. Now, again, then looking at all of the options on the table, if we were to look at doing a brand new facility, there are 2 different ways that you could look at that. One would be build a new building on the same campus. So imagine that you would put a new building on the existing high school campus, clearly not where the high school is right now, but on that campus, you would construct that new facility. Then there's a variety of options. You could demolish the entire existing facility. You could demolish some of the existing facility. So that provides a range between $162.8 million and $173.2 million. Again, that would depend upon how much of the existing building do you keep. So one concept would be you could keep the auditorium, the gymnasium, and the upper and lower cafeterias as really a community asset for people to rent and to use, in addition to our students being able to use them. That is the, again, new building, same campus, a variety of different ways to look at, but you're getting that $162.8 million to $173.2 million. The final pathway would be a brand new building on a new site. And to be super clear, The district hasn't even considered purchasing any land for something like this, right? So a land acquisition is in part of the plan. And that estimate is to range 172.8 million to 176.4 million. Again, there's some best estimates that we have right now that we would need more professional advice on about acquiring land. We would need to have some real discussion about, do you leave the existing high school facility as is and sell the entire campus as one and allow the purchaser to do what they want? Would you need to demolish the existing building to make it palatable for a purchaser to make a bid on that property? Those are things that we don't know. But this is why we want to just really emphasize, we are still early in this process. We are trying to give the community here the different ways that we could solve this problem. There are two additions to any one of those pathways. One of which would be considering a geothermal solution that would really reduce the traditional gas or natural gas kind of systems. And of course, what that would do is it would make our utility bills lower. It is obviously a very forward-looking thing from our carbon footprint perspective. We know we have a really great example of this in the community. Carleton College has a geothermal system that is primarily responsible for its heating and cooling systems. The estimate for that ranges from $5 to $7 million. There's some new technology that allows you to put fewer wells in a smaller footprint, which makes this more doable, but there's some additional testing and things that would have to happen. And then finally, something that could be added to any of the options, option one, the maintenance or renovation pieces, is not only replacing the windows, but expanding the windows. So if you were to just replacing the windows is what's in that base estimate. And if you wanted to expand the windows so that you'd be able to have more natural light within the existing facility, the estimate is to add about $2.5 million to any one of those of the first three options, 1A, 1B, or 1C, so that you would be able to expand the amount of natural light coming into the building. So I think it's important for folks to understand that when you're trying to calculate these expenses for when you bid them, there are a variety of factors that need to be taken into account. So this would not go before the voters until next November. You wait until once it is passed, then you're going to have quite a bit of time for planning, right? We don't have those plans yet. That's just not something that's stewardly to pay an architect to do these kinds of levels of plans when we're not sure that we would have the approval of the community to do so. So there's a time frame for development. You'd anticipate probably bidding this sometime in 2026 with very likely a 2027, 26, 27 build it. Those are things that are still up for discussion, but that's how we're trying to project where those costs are, not just right now, but where they will be down the line. So that's, again, a factor that can be challenged to calculate. But this is what we are looking at this point. I want to emphasize that this is not final. These are big picture pathways using standard architectural calculation methods to try to look at what they have their best estimate that these items would cost. There are some space summaries that are included to try to provide a little bit more detail of the kinds of things that architects take into account when they're making these calculations. Again, those things can be changed. So, for example, someone might look at a particular department at the high school and take a look at the number of rooms that are in the space summary and say, well, wait a minute, that's not enough, or that's too many for us for right now. But this is really a standard calculation method to be able to give what we think the best estimate for the industry standard would be. That doesn't mean that we can't make additional adjustments. Again, this is the beginning portion. The space summary is the math, if you will, behind how the architects arrive at those numbers. So again, for test purposes, big letters, draft, right? For discussion only, it's intended to help you make the decision about what we might ask the voters to consider in November. So just as we're coming down the line, remind people of that January 29th public meeting. We have another tour of the high school on February 3rd. At the February 12th meeting, we'll start talking about some of the potential tax impact. Just as I had shared with some folks earlier, you know, the early estimates that we were using for interest on a 20-year bond was around 5%. We know that Mankato Area Public Schools sold bonds last week for about 3.71%. That's a big difference in how we think about structuring things. So these are the estimates and the variances that we're trying to work through. So as we keep moving forward, we just want to emphasize that this is intended to help us make those decisions. So February 12th, you get some tax impact. February 26th, you will hear the results of the telephone survey from Morris Leatherman Company. We have a March 5th early work session from 4 p.m. to 5:59 p.m. And then on March 11th, we will ask you to vote on which way would you like us to go, if any, to put something on the ballot in November. So that is where we're at. Be happy to take any questions, hear any discussion that board members have. We weren't able to have our expert partners here tonight. Unfortunately, they had some conflicts, but we'll take any questions that you have and use those to prepare for the next meeting that we have. So hopefully I've done enough to just recap and share what we talked about. I do also, one other item I do want to point out is that in the packet at the work session, we also had a really great presentation from our district youth council. They had done a presentation during the work session. It was survey data from around a little more than 700 students. Those students provided that feedback about the high school, and those slides are also in the packet for people to take a look at.
Terrific. Thank you for that update. Very thorough. Appreciate the effort that you put into that recap. Board members, if you have any questions or comments, I'll call on you. And Ben, I'll call on you in just a bit. Questions, Jenny?
Thank you, Dr. Hillman, for all the information. I have just some questions on some of the new information that we received since our work session. So one of the items was the geothermal. We now have some pricing. And I was wondering if that was the same pricing for all 6 pathways?
Yes, that is my understanding. I will confirm that. And the reason that I have understood is that here's my understanding of it, is that this part is for the items of a geothermal system that are outside of the facility. So there's the well system, and that the delivery system inside of the building is similar to how the heating and cooling is delivered if you had a traditional heating element, if you will, a traditional boiler system. So the issue is you pay for all of those things on the inside of the building. The additional cost is for the wells and the other parts that really lead into it. That's my best understanding right now.
Yeah, and then it says on this high school options, all options geothermal 5,000 or 5 million, sorry. So I would assume that geothermal.
They could be added to any one of those options.
And there has been no drawbacks discussed as to if that's chosen for one of the non-new construction pathways versus the new construction?
I don't think that we've gotten to that level of pro-con yet, because we had asked them to give us what was their best estimate. And so I think that is the next question of what are the pros and cons? Can it be done with all of the options? Yes. You are probably right that there are most likely pros and cons to all of the solutions there. So this was the pricing that they worked to get us for the board packet. And then we can add that question to our next time that we talk with Sal.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I also wanted to ask about the technology and engineering classrooms that are presented, that we received the square footage for options 3 and 4 for new construction. And it wasn't, and I couldn't compare it to any technology or engineering classes or classrooms in any of the other options, because there's nothing new there. So my question is this square footage and information on those classrooms just a mirror kind of what is currently in the high school in those classrooms?
I will have to get that answer for you. I do know that in some other instances, when we had some staff we shared this with, take a look at the detail, they had a few concerns about it was different than what they had now. Not in a ton of them, but just in at least one other case, Jenny. So I want to make sure I get it right. What Sal and the team did is they did their best to be able to use a standard projection, if you will. I believe it's close, but I'm just going to double check to get you the precise information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Anyone else? Amy, you have a question, comment?
Yes, I do. Sort of following up a little bit on the technology question. Are there new, I know one of the things you sent out in your most recent letter to the board was how Minnesota's dead last in computer science education. And is that something that we've thought about with this whole process and how that would play in? I know we're not as bad as other parts of Minnesota, but
Right.
can we even do better?
Right. And so I think computer science is different in many ways than, for example, the technology and engineering area. Technology and engineering, there's a number of different large pieces of equipment that you need to have. Computer science is obviously different. We still have a couple of computer labs at the existing high school. And how you would do that in the future in a new building, maybe we wouldn't include a computer lab in a new building, but you would include a laptop cart, right? That's what you'll see in some place where they do need a full computer to be able to do that. There are pieces where you can do some programming at other levels. If we were to look at expanding our computer programming offerings, which again, we offer 2 courses at the high school, which is far better than a lot of our competitors across the state. But you would either set aside some space for a computer lab. You're not going in a school our size, you won't have multiple sections of computer science happening at the same time, right? So if you did have a computer lab, you could schedule it up to 7 hours a day, right? If we had 7 sections of computer programming, I think we'd all be through the roof. That'd be great. But there are some other ways to be able to do that, either through using iPads with younger students. There's some programming languages that you can teach on that. And also it could be the potential of a laptop card that a math teacher or the computer science teacher might use during that time period where they are teaching a programming course.
Okay, I guess I just hope someone's thinking about that piece of this whole puzzle as we're going through it. I do have a couple other questions. When they were looking at practice turf and pricing it, do you know, were they looking at environmentally friendly practice turf, or were they looking at base level, not particularly environmentally friendly turf, or?
I don't know the answer to the specific details of what's in the quote, or that it's not even a quote in the calculation. We know that that pricing did include a fence and lighting around it. Again, the purpose of even considering or discussing any kind of turf would be really to expand the ability for students to be outside in Minnesota weather. This is not replacing competition. Again, it's a concept discussion of we would love our Phi Ed kids to be out earlier at the high school in the spring. We know that it is generous to say that other than Memorial Field, which drains beautifully, the other fields that we have around the high school do not drain very well. So I don't know the definition of an environmentally friendly or not, but as something we can ask Sal. That again, it's a placeholder for this is what in general this kind of facility costs.
Again, I just wanted to put that question out there because I've been asked that question by some of the residents, and I know that there are different options available for turf, and some are better than others. The other question I have is, when you look at the reimagining existing, does that include adding a field house? I mean, are we going up?
Could you say one more time? I missed
When
out.
we look at option 2, reimagining existing,
Yes,
that includes adding a field house as
it does
well.
include adding a field house. Yes,
And then,
the cost includes it as well.
and I just have to make a general comment about how I'm sort of blown away by the prices. And when I think back to 2017, and we could have built a whole new high school for $70 million.
80. Yep.
It was $80 million, and now it's more than twice that. And just not that many years later, and I'm flabbergasted by that.
I do want to just point out that again, it is projected out to when you would bid the project. So they have a standard cost escalation. So it's not necessarily $24, but it's what they think it will be, that cost escalation will be. But I do think that it is an important piece of learning for us that how quickly costs can escalate and how much more we pay when we wait.
Well, and arguably, you could say the same thing when they were pricing it in 2017. They were pricing it out a few years.
Fair enough. Yep. It's a good point.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Ben, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you. Nope, I do not. I appreciate the comprehensive summary, Dr. Hillman. Looking forward to continuing working on this.
Very nice. Okay, Noel or Jeff, either of you have a question or comment? Dr. Himmel, I wanted to hear you say once again about how activities across the district would be impacted
That's a great
by
point.
an update to the high school.
Yeah, I had a family ask me last week, so does this mean that a field house at the high school, would that allow us to use our elementary school gyms for elementary school activities again? And the purpose of that question is that because we have such pressure across the entire system, almost every elementary school gym every day after school is used for some kind of varsity or JV practice or activity. And just because we have the one gym at the high school site, even though it's got 2 courts, it's still we have more teams than that, right? That practice after school. So by expanding the number of courts at the high school, that would allow us to focus our high school practices at the high school and then would relieve some of that pressure for elementary activities and other renters, if you will. So youth basketball, those kinds of things would be able to not only potentially use the field house as available, but it also opens up a lot of elementary gym space for the elementary schools themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't recall if you mentioned tonight or not about renters looking at the space at 5 in the morning.
Yeah,
There's a
that's what I
community
shared the
interest.
other day is that we just discussed last week. We had a group that would like to rent the high school gym from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. for pickleball. And the comment to our was, your gyms are busy. This is the only time that I could find where we would look at potentially, renting your facility for this purpose. So I think that now I know there's a lot of people who like to exercise really early in the morning. But again, that is the kind of space pressure. That's not just a school space pressure, right? That's space pressure throughout the community in terms of people who want to be able to engage in what we know is healthy activity, right? But there was limited time in which they could do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are board members ready to move on? I just want to make sure if you came up with another question or comment. Okay, then we'll go on to item 6, which is committee reports. Ben Miller did submit a report in the packet over the District Youth Council. Ben, you're welcome to make any comments or let the report stand on its own.
Thank you. I will just let the report stand since I'm remote. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, item 7 is our consent agenda. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Okay, moved by Jenny, second by Amy. Board members, any comments or questions before we do a roll call vote? Ben, and you can speak up if you ever have a comment or question. Okay, Anita, will you facilitate a roll call vote on the consent agenda?
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Very good. Thank you. That motion passes. All right, we're on to items for individual action. Our first item is the policy recommendation. I will take a motion first and then we can discuss, and then Anita will facilitate the roll call vote. Is there a motion to approve the recommended updates to policy 906? Moved by Amy. Can I have a second? I'll second. All right. Dr. Hillman, do you have any comments to make?
No, there were nothing additional since when we presented this for the first reading the last time. Just remind folks, it was some very modest changes in the general statement of policy and really focused on aligning with some new statutory references.
Thank you. Board members, I will call on you if you have any questions or comments about this policy. Questions or comments? All right, Anita, will you facilitate the vote?
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Okay, motion passes. Next, item B is a request to hire additional English learner instructional support. Is there a motion to approve up to $19,000 for FTE to support English language learners at Northfield Middle School for the remainder of 23-24 school year, with the assumption of a January 2024 start date and an end date of June 6, 2024? And I will, I'll move that if I can have a second. Second by Amy. Okay, and then Hope Langston will present and or answer any of your questions, board members. Come, Hope.
Good evening. Our numbers continue to change. We have another new enrollment this week at GVP. So we are now up to 222. The middle school numbers remain at 36, and the request still stands as needed so that we can meet the service minutes for our English language learners at Northfield Middle School. Any questions?
Thank you, Hope. Okay, questions or comments? Okay, Amy?
This is a very general question. Do you have any sense that this is ongoing group of connected people where this will be continuing, or is these random people from different places, or?
They're actually coming from a number of different places, so not connected groups of people.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Hope to answer? Okay, Ben, no?
Nope, no, thank you. Thanks, Hope.
Okay, thank you, Hope.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Anita, will you facilitate the vote?
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, our next item is our board committee assignments. Is there a motion to approve the board member committee appointments and representation to various organizations and school liaisons for the calendar year 2024? Okay, moved by Jenny. Thank you. Can I have a second? Okay, Amy? Are there any questions or comments, board members? All right, then we can go to the roll call vote.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, board members, and thank you, Anita. Our next item is items for information. And first off, we have the Paraprofessional Recognition Week, January 22nd through the 28th. This is a recognition week in Minnesota. Northfield Public Schools appreciates our educational assistants and the support and services they provide to enhance student achievement. Educational assistants support instruction, assist with visual learning, provide personal care services, and so much more. We're grateful to every EA across the district for their commitment to meeting the needs of our students. Announcement about our public meeting. The school board will host a public meeting at 6 p.m. a week from today, as Dr. Hillman described, in the auditorium at the Northfield High School. The purpose of this meeting is to solicit feedback from the public about the potential options to address the facility problems and needs at the Northfield High School. Our future meetings, item 10, we have a work session and a public meeting as stated next Monday, January 29th, 6 p.m. Public meeting at the high school auditorium. Monday, February 12th, 6 p.m., a regular board meeting here in the boardroom. Monday, February 12th, also will have a closed board meeting immediately following the regular board meeting for the purpose of labor negotiations. And then Monday, February 26th, 6 p.m., another regular board meeting here in the boardroom. That is all the business that we have tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Noel. Thank you, Noel. A second? By Jeff. Thank you. Okay, Anita?
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Stratmon.
Okay, motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, board members.